I'd imagine this is quite an enlightening process for somebody to do, isn't it? Because these are things you would never think about in any great depth.
But a lot of people just stick their brand, their brand strategy on the side of the wall, or their values on the wall, and expect people to remember them. You can tell when a value is true, because if something gets on everyone's nerves at a place and everyone believes in the values, it's because it's breaching the values. So we've done that for the company, but I wouldn't say I know what, even though me and Will have worked together 20 years or whatever, I wouldn't say I know what his beliefs were.
I don't think I know either. Yeah. Although I am going to do this process.
Well, it sounds quite enlightening. You're right, it does sound enlightening to do that.
Yeah, well, obviously got a belief in each other, and bloody good as well. So by identifying that, we then go on to your stories and narratives. So this is a great exercise. So visualize at the end of this 7 stages, we're going to produce, you've got the option to produce what we call a purpose manifesto.
Welcome to Socially Unacceptable, from f***ups to fame, the marketing podcast that celebrates the professional mishaps, mistakes and misjudgments while delivering valuable marketing and life lessons in the time it takes you to eat your lunch.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Socially Unacceptable, and today I'm joined by my business partner again, William Ockenden. Right, mate, how's it going?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Good. Vicky's left a seat warm for you, so I hope you're ready to get back into the swing of things today.
Very warm seat, actually, isn't it? I was going to mention that when I came in.
Well, today we're not alone. We're also joined on the line by somebody that has written more than 7 books on creativity, and he's owned a public relations agency, and today has got a number of different things that he's going to walk you through. So I'll let Will do the formal invitation, but I'd like to just say hi to Andrew Green, or Andy as he likes to be known.
Very formal. Yeah, so hi Andy, thanks for joining us. So for those of you who don't know Andy, he is an award-winning communicator, a trainer, an author, and one might say an all-round creative guru. I don't know how you feel about that, Andy. Among other things, he's actually written the first book on creativity and public relations. He's turned the most depressing day of the year into a global meme, Blue Monday, to raise awareness for mental well-being. And more recently, and this is something we're going to talk about, he actually co-founded the Dublin Conversations, which is a non-commercial global collective of academics and practitioners. Its role is to co-create new thinking and tools to urgently enable the comms industry to be fitter for purpose. And there's elements of that we're actually going to talk about today. Funnily enough, he was actually my first ever boss in the PR industry as well. But hopefully we won't talk too much about that.
Well, there's a theme here, because Stuart was on last week.
Oh, your first boss?
Yeah, my first, well, not my first boss, but one of them.
So if we got time, Andy, which we probably won't have time, we can talk about that later. So there's quite a few things. Have I missed anything off there, Andy, from the list?
No, it's a very extensive list there. You tend to find when people call me a guru, it's because they can't spell charlatan.
We'll go with that one. So so what we're going to talk about today with Andy is your new initiative, which is how to discover your purpose and character. And this is all about, I'm sure you'll sum it up a little bit more succinctly than me, Andy, but it's about how people and teams or organizations can realize their full potential in their next campaign or in their work or in their life. Is that a fair assessment, or do you want to probably do a much better job of explaining it than me?
Well, I'll sum it up as the big why question. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Like, why are you doing this podcast? Why are you working with Chris? Why are you working in your agency? Why are you doing your work? It's a central underlying question, the foundation for what gets you out of bed every day. And in a world that's got increasingly complex and faster moving, the more you can identify your core purpose, your core why you're here, what it's all about, that is a better way of managing greater complexity in terms of like digital marketing. It's getting much more fragmented. How do you manage that fragmentation? By having a strong central core identity and purpose. You're also witnessing, as I say, what's called radical transparency, where it's a very naked world now. When I first started off many years ago, most companies didn't do PR as such. Kept the strategy of, we'll keep our head down, don't talk to the media. We just cannot do that in this modern age of radical transparency. And also then you've got a deepening of this, again, this sense of who you are, your purpose. People don't just want to buy a product, they want to buy an engagement, a sense of belonging, a sense of an alliance that by buying this product, this person's advancing my agenda, my story and take on the world. And then you've got a massive development in what we call social capital comms. So think of movements like Black Lives Matter, XR Rebellion. They've got no head office. They're doing what's called community organising. And again, if you want to motivate, inspire, get people to join your cause, you need a strong sense of character and purpose. So, as I say, it's critical, fundamental to not only just survive, but be really outstandingly successful in today's world.
And I think that's what was quite, and we'll dig into exactly what purpose is and how we can discover our inner purpose. I mean, my first observation on that, I suppose, is, we hear a lot about purpose, don't we, in the comms industry, but it's usually through the lens of organisational purpose. So are we talking about individual purpose here, Andy?
Purpose that transcends, and we start from an individual perspective because it's the world's made up of people and individuals and actions, as well as a collective. So it's important to look at both dimensions. A number of times you see organisations, they do a purpose exercise or a values exercise, and they're sort of treating this sort of bland, amorphous whole rather than the individuals or the heart and blood of what makes that organisation tick and exist. So very much so. So in our products and services, so we're entirely non-commercial, provide everything for free. We've got a Discover Your Purpose program where, as I say, you can identify who you are, what you are. The analogy I use is that imagine you look in the mirror in a bathroom and it's a very steamy bathroom and you're getting a very fuzzy image. By identifying your purpose, your values, beliefs and so on, you get a much clearer, greater clarity about who you are, what you're about, when you say yes, when you say no, what makes you tick and so on. So, as I say, it's absolutely at the heart of things, critical things there.
So in a minute, we'll dig into how to, because what I think our listeners would like is kind of practical steps around and a toolkit around how we can actually dig into our purpose. But I guess taking a step back, why should I care about my purpose? Will this improve my ability to communicate? Will it bring kind of tangible benefits to the way I do things professionally?
Every dimension. At the heart of your performance is confidence. Confidence in having a strong sense of self-belief. If you've got greater clarity about who you are, you articulate who you are in a more compelling way. That's going to turbocharge your success and chances in life. It's going to help you get connect with others quicker, want others to connect with you, want you to get out of bed in the morning, want you to pick yourself up when you get knocked down. Nothing's more critical.
So should we dig into how to do this then, Chris?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear this because personal purpose and company purpose are they're quite different things. Like, why do I get, you started off there by saying, why do you get out of bed in the morning? I do ask myself that some days when the kids are doing my head in. Why do we get out of bed? What drives you? What makes you come back? That is genuinely quite interesting, but it's very different to company purpose in my view, because companies are there for different reasons and have different beliefs and different values. So yeah, I'm quite interested to hear how we can apply this in a day-to-day, as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, maybe start at the beginning, Andy. I'm engaged, I'm interested, I can see the benefit of my sort of understanding and developing my personal purpose. Where do I start?
Well, if you visit our website, www.dublinconversations.org, where we've got a free toolkit of over 34 tools and in 6 families of tools. One of those families of tools is our Discover Your Purpose program. And what we've created is a 7-step process for this massive complex question of who am I and what's my purpose. And so we'll take you through the 7 steps. And each step we provide a free tool or set of tools so that you can download, either do it by yourself. We always recommend doing it with other people, actually, or as a team or in a structured environment to motivate, because it's a massive question you're addressing about who you are. And as I say, it's a pleasure shared and you'll find it sort of motivates people and supportive. So the first step is identifying your values. Values is one of these misunderstood word. I remember years ago when Will was working with us, and we had Leeds University as a client, and they come to us and said, we're a values-led organisation. And I said, sorry to disappoint you, but everyone's values-led. Adolf Hitler was values-led. He may have a different set of values to us, but people somehow think having values is a noble thing in itself. It's fundamental. I breathe, and whatever. So the values tool enables you to identify your values. And as I say, and as a result of that, the process then consists of identifying the top 5 values. And 5's a magic number because you can only remember 5 things. So if I say to Chris, can you name the 7 dwarf? So he gets to 5 and then struggles.
Probably
you can only
dopey.
remember 5
Get
things.
stuck on dopey.
And so the idea then is that by knowing your 5 values, it helps you identify who you are, what's important to you, what drives behaviours. And also then you can then create a narrative around your story of how you do what you do. So if you ask people like, how do you do what you do? You might maybe give us a response of, well, I do some PR, some digital marketing. Whereas by explaining it by your values. So I'm driven by number 1 value is transformative communications. My second value is discovery and insight. My third value is creativity. My fourth value is, I call it creative subversiveness. And my fifth value is a lovely word called minescence, which is about making complex things easy to understand. And from those 5 ingredients, I can then create a narrative of explaining how I do what I do. So the values is the first step. And by doing the values, it helps unpack and discover greater clarity about yourself. The next step is identifying what's your character. So imagine, I'm picking on Chris here, sorry, mate, but Chris, you're going on stage.
Please carry on.
Amateur theatre group. An amateur theatre group. Chris goes out and be a character. Your first question is going to be, well, what's the character? What's the character notes? And how often are we in communications, marketing, PR, comms, doing the equivalent of telling a story about something where we've not got a character note? Who is this character? So we've got a brilliant tool. You may be familiar with what's called archetypes. This is a process that originally pioneered by the psychologist and anthropologist Carl Jung that identified that different societies around the world have maybe different cultures, but they all share the same stories and myths and legends, also the same cast list. And his theory was that if you wrap your character around one of these 12 archetypes, you're going to get more cut through. And I think neuroscience has proved Jung right. So we've got a simple tool where it's like a job interview. Which of these 12 is going to be me? And it gives you a character then to then project your story through with greater clarity and coherence. So that's the second step. Then the third step
just before we go on to the third step, Andy, one of my questions was going to be actually, how do we, taking values, how do we actually get to our values? Is it just a period of great introspection for several days, or is there literally tools and questions that will help kind of shape our thinking? Because it's tough, isn't it? You go to somebody, what are your values? And people would just say, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, great question. So we make that task easier by providing you with a tool that identifies 128 established values. And from that values bank, you can then do a review, identify which are the hot ones, which are the warm ones, which are the cold ones. And through a process of distilling those down, typically in first stab, and it sounds a lot like 128, that's going to take me ages, but we ask people to do it quick. And you're going to probably about 90 plus, you're going to instantly say, well, that's not me. So it gets it down. And we do tools like I use like Google Jamboard, which is like post-it note, online post-it note. And so you do a short list of the candidate values. It could be anything between sort of 10 and 20 or 30. And then we then do a chunking exercise where you find some of these values. So like there's a creativity value, a pioneering value, and you put those together and link those to that are similar. And as a result of that, you can draw up your cast list of about 5 dominant values, prime values that drive your behaviours.
Got it.
So as you say, it's a great question. And let's say first time it's a free tool, make it available to do. And it's crazy. I mean, people know how old they are, know their weight, possibly in some cases, but don't know their values. It's crazy. But I'd imagine 98% of the population wouldn't be able to answer that question. And yet it's quite fundamental and critical.
Okay, so on to stage 3 then. That was a good explanation. What are we looking at next?
Well, so belief. So how you see the world, the actual foundation stone are your beliefs. So you're doing this podcast because you believe that you have a right to do it. You believe everything you do is driven by belief, and logically, this should be the first step in our 7 steps. But what we found when we did that, we did pilot trials in Canada, Australia, Ireland, and the UK. And what we found is that, it's too overwhelming a question. So, Chris, again, mate, if I said to you, what do you believe in? You can say, well, that's such a big, immense question. So it's a bit like the analogy that if I said to you, Chris, name me things that are white other than your T-shirt, you still might flounder. But if I say to you, Chris, name me things that are white that are in your fridge, you go, the milk, the cheese, the yogurt. So what we found is that by doing the values and persona archetype first, you then say, well, I value this, I'm this character, then therefore my beliefs must be this, this, and this. So it makes that task of identifying your beliefs manageable. And again, advise to identify your top 5 beliefs that then drive it. And by doing so, it helps explain you in your story, but it's also a brilliant management tool to say yes and no quicker. Because if someone asks you to do something, you just run it past your checklist of beliefs.
Okay.
And say yes, no.
So what were your top 5 beliefs then?
Some including everyone is creative, that we've got to make the most of our situation, most of our potential, that believe in strong sense of social justice, that we need to fight and campaign for a fairer world. I believe West Ham are the best football team in the whole universe.
That's wrong. Just to be clear, that's wrong.
I should put.
I was wondering how long until
before we slid into Declan Rice conversations.
Yeah, I was expecting that.
Yeah. So you can see there, but there's a very, very powerful assets for both, in terms of creating a compelling story about yourself, as well as really identifying who you're about, what you're about.
So, I know we're only halfway through, but I'd imagine this is quite an enlightening process for somebody to do, isn't it? Because these are things you would never think about in any great depth, and you're really kind of forcing people to consider quite.
Unless you set up a company, because when we were set up Prohibition, to go through what our beliefs are and what we believe in our values, because a lot of people just stick their brand. Their brand strategy on the side of the wall, or their values on the wall, and expect people to remember them. And apparently, values come through. You can tell when a value is true, because if something gets on everyone's nerves at a place and everyone believes in the values, it's because it's breaching the values. So we've done that for the company, but I wouldn't say I know what, even though me and Will have worked together 20 years or whatever, I wouldn't say I know what his beliefs were.
I don't think I know either, although I am going to do this process.
It sounds quite enlightening. You're right, it does sound enlightening to do that.
Yeah, well, obviously got a belief in each other, and bloody good as well. So by identifying that, we then go on to your stories and narratives. So this is a great exercise. So visualize at the end of this 7 stages, we're going to produce, you've got the option to produce what we call a purpose manifesto. It serves as like your credo, your statement. And so, for example, in the story stage, we ask people to do their greatest hits. Like, what would be if you had an album, like Chris or Will's greatest hits, what would be on it? And then so I reflected on this. And, as you mentioned there, I've sort of done several books on creativity, won more than 20 plus awards and whatever. But apparently on reflection, my greatest hit was when I was 9 years old. I taught my younger brother, who's profoundly autistic, cannot speak, had severe behavioural challenges. I taught him to ride a bike. And I thought, look, how did I do that? And what an amazing thing. And he, when we take him away on holiday, he goes on his bike rides and stuff. And all of us have got, episodes like that in our locker. We're talking to people. We had one lady who mentioned about that there was someone threatening to jump off the edge of a building, and out of the crowd, she was the only one stepped forward to talk him out. And she'd never told that story since the episode. And I'm not saying like you go around saying, "Oh, I'm the person who talked," but have it there. So your purpose statement could be something that's private. I'll put mine public, but it's a massive asset in that archive of our head. Do we effectively harness it? It's like having it's like having a crown jewel, but you've got it wrapped in newspaper at the back of the sideboard rather than on the front of the mantelpiece. So this next stage is about identifying these stories that bring your values, bring your beliefs alive. Tell the story of your past, but also your future. It's a very powerful statement going forward. We've then got other stages where we've got what's called your social instincts. And this can cover a multitude of dimensions, but we cover 2 areas. One is whether you're a leader or a follower. And this was inspired by the follow-up with one of our delegates on one of our courses, where she absolutely loved the program, loved the course, but apparently her boss was disappointed because he wanted to do it so that she'd be more of a leader. And so Reddit's reflect actually that there's a critical dimension. You want to create change, yes, you want leaders, but you also, more important perhaps, you need bloody good followers. And followership is a quality that goes really under-recognised. And this boss, really, he had a brilliant person who was a great follower, and that should have been celebrated, respected, and harnessed to its potential, rather than put a square peg in a round hole. So the social instinct stage identifies whether you're a leader or follower, so to play to your strengths, and sometimes it might be a mixture of both. And it also critically identifies whether you're a we-led or a me-led person. And what do we mean by that? So the sociologists can now do experiments to establish laws of human behaviour. And one of them is that 2 out of 3 people will help a stranger, which also means that 1 out of 3 don't. So it's not to make moral judgment, but really these are instincts of where people's we-led is your instinct is to look at the collective, the group interest, the common, whereas a me-led is self-centered. And we believe that actually going forward, if public relations wants to thrive and survive, it should recognise maybe that it's a philosophy based on we-led thinking, as opposed to maybe advertising, which might be characterised by being me-led thinking. So again, profound instincts there. Are you a me-led or we-led person? And again, a greater understanding of who you are and what you're about. And then we move on to the stage then to find out our purpose, or we say purposes. So you don't just have one purpose, but we believe there's 3 key 3 dimensions to purpose. One is your business purpose. What is it you need to survive, grow, and multiply? Which almost like your biological purpose, why you do what you do. So you must have a notional business purpose, set up production, and I want to earn X amount of money. So that can serve as your business purpose. Then you've got a creative purpose of why you do what you do. That sort of deep why question. And then a social purpose, which tends to be defined as brands doing good. But we believe it's who you need to be connected with to realise your creative business and creative purpose. So in each of your cases, you guys need each other to achieve a greater sum than the individual parts are. So one of your key social purposes will be Will to keep Chris happy and Chris to keep Will happy.
Easier said than done.
Just move that chair out of the office, Will. That'll help.
Don't push me, Norton.
No, it was a wonderful relationship, and then you got wider networks of your team, people like me, people like your other speakers, your customers, clients, and so on. So purpose is really then about what is your business purpose, what is your creative purpose, and who is it you need to be connecting with to realise both those things. And that leads us to the final stage, which is your prime purposefulness. So for some people are critical of the idea of purpose, saying, I just want to make money. Well, hello, that's a purpose. You might be dominated by just business purpose, not my choice of purpose, but that's a purpose. And you get some people are artists who do pictures for their own sake. That might be an extreme creative purpose. Or you get extreme social purpose. I'm just happy being a member of the family, being part of the club. So for some, it's a combination. It might be a combination of 1 or 2, or a balance between all 3. So in my case, I've identified myself, I've got a prime purposefulness that I'm achieving greater social good through improving how we socially interact. I want to earn X amount of money, and I need to connect with good people like you to other people and beyond to realise that dream and realise that purpose. So, and at the end of that 7 stages, which sounds quite exhausting, when you think about it, it's a bloody big job. You identified who you are, and there's the option you have for creating your own purpose manifesto, which are phenomenally inspiring tools. What we found through our pilot trials around the world is that the benefits of doing a program is, one is at the very least, you'll have an understanding of what a purpose program consists of, how you go about it. Secondly, you might engage with a number of tools, so you might come away knowing your values, beliefs, and so on. And thirdly, you may come away with a purpose manifesto. But not everyone is suited to doing the purpose manifesto. For some, we've found it's been not the right time for them. They still may lack the confidence to sort of put something down there, or it just might not be they feel comfortable about the option. So whatever way you want to pick it, address it, it's there to meet those different needs and realise those different needs to create those benefits there. So, guys, I've thrown a lot at you and your listeners there in terms of a big process, but we'll try to make it like the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, by breaking it down into steps, tools to support and manage. We can make it digestible and doable and manageable.
I mean, when you say the words purpose manifesto, that feels like huge, doesn't it? It doesn't feel like a small piece of work. It feels like a lot of work. That, but is it how over what sort of period are you supposed to go through this process?
Well, as I say, it's a massive task. We found from our experience, if you're in well-structured situations, that can do it quicker. So we did some work with a global network of future leaders in the events industry around the world. Very well structured, not a sort of subtle competition there. And they did the program in 2 sessions.
Okay.
With doing the exercises in their own time. We've devised the format of 3 60-hour sessions plus additional coaching. But it's as long as a piece of string, can be as quick and short. The one caveat: watch out for people, particularly in the communications industry, because they're very good at coming up with words. And the danger is you could come up with a very superficial, sounds good, but is it real? Is it authentic? And I think that's a critical dimension about authenticity. Is it the real you? Or is it just a veneer that sounds good? But what's it really achieving?
So once I've gone through this process, which I think we will give it a go for sure, and then we've got our purpose manifesto and so on. How do we then kind of apply this in our day-to-day lives? Let's say I'm a marketing director of a big financial company, or I'm an account manager in a PR firm, or I'm a brand manager. How do I kind of I've obviously got a greater understanding of my values, my persona, my beliefs. How do I then apply that to what I do and how I live?
That's a great question. The first thing is you become a better listener because you listen to a bigger picture, and it's a deliberate mixed metaphor. And also you start listening to people's scripts. You become sort of a story listener because you don't just listen to the information that people give you. You listen to the information within a context of clues about their purpose, clues about who they are, clues about their values and beliefs. And therefore, if you've got a deeper, richer understanding of someone you're dealing with, you've got greater potential to either engage at a deeper, more profound and significant level, or, to contextualize it better, or, as I say, to motivate yourself in responding to that situation. You also then weave it into your communication so that you don't just, number of times you get people do values exercises that's sitting in some report on the HR director's shelf rather than integrating, living and breathing. So every time you communicate and every time you integrate a value in it, it deepens that value and makes that value more aware to you going forward there. So to answer the key question is that, and also you're going to be, people are going to be asking of you a lot more for you. People are going to ask you, well, where's your purpose? Why are you here? And through that exercise, it's not about, you've suddenly got to adopt a set of external clothes. It's more about actually identifying the internal clothes, the internal suit that exists within each and every one of us, and bringing it out loud and clear, as compelling and clear and authentic as possible.
You mentioned something earlier, actually, about, I think it was the beliefs. The better you understand your beliefs, the easier it is to say no to things. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that? Is that about kind of rejecting opportunities that aren't in line with your beliefs, which ultimately, I suppose, leads to greater time management, greater efficiencies?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest monsters of our time is the haven't got time monster. And I believe, profoundly believe it's getting significantly worse through demands of modern life, social media impact and so on. So, it's increasingly saying yes to ones who've got greater clarity, but no to ones. But equally, I'm very, with my creativity, I'm very much passionate about having ambiguity. That sometimes it might not sound like a good one. But I'll give you an example. There was a lad once who tried to work for a PR company, and he used to come to work in a green combat jacket, But you can see actually beyond that there was something in him that actually beyond the person who hadn't quite left being a student, that he had some sort of potential. So there's
who could that be? Who could that be, Andy? I'm not sure.
I don't think you ever reached that potential, to be honest.
Well,
maybe one day.
I believe you guys have got a lot more to go, guys. So please, maybe base camp 4 or 5 and then more to go. But go back to your question, Will, as I say, this point about, as I say, just this clarity, it might mean that, let's say, get you going the extra yard or not going in the particular direction or whatever. As I say, it's not necessarily a magic wand, and it can be, let's say, some hard medicine in there as well as some good stuff as well.
So, do you want to just remind everybody, Andy, where they need to go to fill in this kind of use these online tools? I'm sure they'd be interested to find out.
Yeah, so the Dublin Conversation has its own website. It's www.dublinconversations.org. And I say it's non-commercial, completely free, because we're trying to kickstart a more purposeful world. And then at the heart of that is people being more purposeful. And so that's why we're doing up these free tools to say, well, look, we can take things up a notch or two. And equally, we don't have the answer necessarily, but and we're passionate about co-creation, co-production. We've got a conference coming up in Sligo at the end of September, a weekend conference. As I say, one of my co-founders of the Dublin Conversation, a lovely man by the name of Porrick McEwen, and a typical Brit. I was mispronouncing his name for the first 3 months and mispronouncing it loudly. But Porrick describes it as a conference of 3 halves. So 1, to sort of hone and develop your talents and skills. 2, to co-create and co-produce new ideas. So it's going to be like a working workshop as well as a sort of a listening one. And thirdly, probably the best crack of any learning event with breakout sessions in 2 local pubs, an oyster bar and a traditional Irish milliners. So we're looking to produce then from that conference the Dublin Blueprint Volume 1, which will then be like a basis of, this is where we've got to so far, folks. And then we've got another year of engagement where we're looking to do a second conference next year, in 2024. And in the meantime, we're having these global conferences. So the Dublin website features 231 conversations, of which we've done about 30 so far. And hopefully maybe like you guys do one where we're recording with leading academics, practitioners, and also rising talent to take them through what we call our 5 steps to the Dublin window. So really, as I say, what we look passionate about is bottom-up led change that's not owned by anyone, that's owned by everyone. And really, as I say, we've got a world of growing distrust, division, dislocation. What we're going to do about it? We should be, in the communications and marketing industry, should be taking a lead in creating a better world around us. We've got skills and talents. Are we really using that to its full potential to achieve, for the world we want? It's also in our self-interest, because if the world's less distrusting, how are they going to engage with us, our clients, and our products and services?
Fantastic. That actually leads us into the second bit of our conversation, and we couldn't resist asking you about this, Andy. It's about creativity, in particular brainstorming. Now, I know this is only a kind of a tiny bit of what you do, and obviously you wrote the first ever book on creativity in public relations. But something I've always found quite fascinating about the work you do is some of these kind of really practical rules for how to run effective brainstorms, and also the idea that everybody is creative, and I know that's something you always kind of you always drum into your delegates, don't you? The fact that everybody is creative and everybody can come up with fantastic ideas. So on that, and this is just a kind of a quick tips for our listeners, really. Do you want to talk to us about brainstorms, perhaps? I think the tendency in the PR industry is to get about 20 people around a table. Half of them don't contribute. The brief's a bit woolly, and you come away after about an hour's work with 2 or 3 half-formed ideas, and that's obviously hugely inefficient, isn't it? Is there better ways to run brainstorms, and is there better ways to get great ideas?
I hope so.
Yeah. Certainly, brainstorms have a role to play, but I recognise the point you said there. We are all phenomenal creativity machines, and to celebrate and make use of that, I would suggest actually in the first instance, look to avoid doing the brainstorm in the first place, because a lot of time I find it is people do brainstorm as an excuse for them to come up with ideas, put themselves on the line to share. So what's the point of getting people together to come up with ideas that you would have come up with already? And so really what we're doing with like the creative journey is really both not just coming up with ideas, but coming up with better quality questions. Because at the heart of the creative process is what I call a beautiful question. You can tell you've got a beautiful question when you come up, your brain's buzzing with ideas and responses. And that's a combination of A, you're an innate creative genius, and B, you've got a beautiful question. Whereas a lot of time we spend our time with ugly questions. So what I would urge people to do is explore the question. Do question storming at the outset as much as brainstorming. What are the real questions?
What's a beautiful question then?
So a beautiful question is, you've had it, Chris, where you've been working on a situation and you're buzzing. Your ideas are coming up with loads of ideas.
Yeah.
Now that's a combination of your innate creative genius and you're working on a beautiful question. Whereas you're a creative genius, but then you can't come up with ideas. And I'm suggesting you've not lost your creative genius. You're just working on an ugly question and need to focus on the question, reframe the question. Chad, our God is insight. Insight is if you've got insight. So I define insight doing now what you would do in hindsight. And therefore, as I say, spend time on the question. Spend time, whoever owns the brief, to come up with ideas. Whoever owns the brief, go around. Anyone done something like this before? What's the point in reinventing the wheel? And with resource and time is precious. Only will when you feel like you've exhausted that, you feel, actually, I've got the situation where I've identified these questions, I've exhausted what I've come up with ideas, I've exhausted my inner circle of contacts. Hey guys, can we come together and then do the brainstorm where you identify the questions, and then a number of techniques, for example, and you can do this online as well as offline, using post-it notes to capture ideas. So that A, stops the shouters dominating. And there's a tendency, people who are very verbal at brainstorms, to see them as, they're the creative ones. No, they're the people who are very good at verbalizing an embryonic idea. You get some people who don't say much, but it's then more thought through. Is that less creative? It's just to say a different form and different type of creativity get employed there. So in terms of brainstorms, look to avoid doing them in the first place, because you're creating a time tax for your colleagues. And then could you come up with a better result by yourself? And then use it selectively to stretch and go beyond what you know already, can do already, and then get the input. And also get a wide variety of input, from like the juniors. And actually the value of brainstorms is outside the arena of creativity. It's more about team building or buying into a decision as much as the generation of an idea going forward. And one last tip there, always do a follow-up the day after, because what you tend to find is brainstorms get the best ideas in the shower that evening or the next morning, and people don't do the follow-up there. So I hope that's been helpful for some of the listeners there.
Yeah.
Very helpful, Andy. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that. And I hope everyone will check out the Dublin Conversations website. Some big sort of complex ideas there. And I think really, it's the chance to really kind of push yourself and really discover something about yourself with tangible benefits by the sound of it, coming out the other end. So yeah, thank you very much, Andy. Fantastic.
Yeah.
You've forgotten the main part of the show again.
And there's...
I told you, didn't I? I told you.
And the final question, Andy, that we ask everybody on this podcast is, what's your biggest fuck up in your career and why? Sorry, I'll start again. The biggest... Oh, fuck. Sorry.
He's fucked it up, hasn't he?
I fucked it all up.
Andy, what's the biggest fuck up in your professional career and what have you learned from it?
Well, someone's putting me earpiece saying hiring Will, but I disagree with that. No, how long we got? But I once got on the front page. I was once an editor of a fishing magazine. So I used to be deputy head of PR at the old Yorkshire Water Authority. So pre-privatisation, they were responsible for fishing licences and stuff. And I ran a competition that inadvertently used a photograph of a young angler with a giant pike tucking into it, not realising that the worst thing that any pike fishing can do is not to throw the thing back. And so the front page of Angling Times, which those days had a circulation of 120,000, had a big 96-point headline, "Anglers in Fury over YW competition."
Our fishy one.
And I think can I just add there, the lesson from anything, always in life. So if you're dealing with a specialist subject, particularly one you've got no knowledge of, always have an expert, someone who knows the audience, someone who knows the product service, close at hand now. So, so anyway, but we live and learn, but we grow from that.
Is it, sorry, just to go back through that, just to deconstruct that, is it the fact that they were eating the pike that was annoying the anglers, right?
Well, it was the fact that there's a fundamental that you catch a pike, take a photo of it, then throw it back.
Yeah. So the fact that he was eating it, right?
Well, the fact that it wasn't thrown back, that it was like dead and not put back in the waters for other anglers to have a go at and respect the pike, perhaps. I don't know.
Okay.
Wow.
And
I mean, you got to make...
Careful when you're fishing,
kids. You've got a long way to go, guys. Yeah, but you see some of these cock-ups about government spokespeople who say something wrong and then they knock millions off the stock market and stuff. So, relatively light maybe in the grand scheme of things.
I like this question, so I'm going to go with it. What's an insult that you've received that you're proud of?
Insult. That's a great one. I've been called an erudite cockney, but in the Barrytown football programme. So that's a very positive. That's an insult. That's a great question. Insult. I'm trying to struggle. I'm actually struggling. What's insult?
I thought it was a good one because I can't think of it.
Actually, every time I've had a knockback in life, rather than sort of sulk or cry, I've used it to feel, like I've proven wrong, sort of thing. So, okay, I was doing the PR for the launch of Tetley's Brewery Wharf in Leeds, which was like the first museum of the pub.
Yeah, and
I got as the VIP the actress Julie Goodyear, better known as Bet Lynch from Coronation Street, so it seemed like an obvious fit. Bet Lynch, barmaid, Britain's best known barmaid. However, what I did realise, and I was discovered that members of the Corrie team, her and also the guy who played Jack Duckworth, made it a sort of a game plan. Anytime they did any public event, they would pick on someone and make their life miserable. And for me, and for the launch of Tetley's Brewery Wharf, it was me. She chose one. So we got introduced. So his ad is in charge of the PR, and she said something bitchy. So I said, I used to be 6'5". She said, it'd be a bloody time I finish with you.
Nice.
And it went from bad to worse. I had to direct the phone call standing around the corner because she couldn't bear my presence. It was Simon Dewhurst.
Yeah. We have Simon the other week.
Yeah, so I remember that. Simon, get her to... I'm standing around the corner so she can't see me. So to do the photograph and stuff. It was ludicrous. But I was told that they do that every time they do a gig. They make someone's life miserable. So,
and unfortunately, it was you.
I've got a final question. What's your favourite productivity hack for entrepreneurs?
That's a great one. Choose good people. Look for good partners. Look for good collaborators. You can't create a Mexican wave by yourself. So actually, a good quality contact. Both in terms might be whether it's a business partner, a collaborator, or something, getting involved in whatever project. So it's that antennae for spotting people who not only do the talk, but act and deliver as well. So I think that's the best sort of. If I could have my time again, I would say that that's a lesson life's taught me. Is about John Lennon was a brilliant artist, but it took a Paul McCartney and the two of them to realise their full potential.
I mean, the one bit I took out of that is you can't start a Mexican wave by yourself. What a great line.
Very good. Thank you very much, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Andy. It's been interesting to hear your bits and pieces and your thought process through how to get purpose, because purpose is a big thing. It's one of the key things that's been discussed in our sector, along with ESG and a number of the other things. So thanks for sharing that. It is very interesting. So I'll send everyone we'll put the link to the website in the podcast notes, so our listeners can get hold of your various free tools and stuff.
Thanks very much, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show, Andy.
Guys, and two great guys, great company, great agents, and keep doing great things, guys.
Thank you.
You're too kind. Cheers, Andy, for that.
Okay, wow, what a podcast that was. Andrew has some interesting takes on things. He literally wrote the book on creativity, and he hired Will Ockenden, something that he shall forever be blamed for. So, Will, what did you take away from Andy's tips today?
Well, a fascinating conversation. And I think, purpose, character, it's one of those things a lot of us don't actually think about. And I think there's a danger of articulating your purpose in a very superficial way, as a lot of brands sometimes do. But actually, this is a much more involved process. And I think it's probably quite...
I think it is for, if you portray it quite articulately, the fact that you understand yourself means you can understand the world so much better. So if you understand yourself better, you're going to understand the world better, and you're going to understand what brands are trying to do and what your company's trying to do. So I do tie in with that, and we've embraced values and company culture and all that stuff. We're really, really big on that.
Interesting point, Chris. And I think there's a danger that we don't understand ourselves enough, is there? We don't understand our purpose. And how can we actually expect to advise or consult brands on their purpose if we don't even understand our own purpose? So
exactly, yeah.
I would suggest this is time well spent, and as Andy said, it can be a very lengthy process. It can be a fairly short process, but spending time considering your values will help you in your career or help you professionally.
The other thing that I took away from it, so Andy's massive on brainstorming. We've had him brought him in for a chat with Prohibition, and we had a big a day on creativity. He is brilliant on creativity. If you get him into send him down certain roads, he'll run down them and do a whole workshop around creativity. He talked about post-it notes during that, and I was thinking, my God, we're back to post-it notes. But actually, the way that he uses it, he uses digital post-it notes, and he pulls it all together and makes it a really. What I like about him is he's not judgmental. He'll let anybody get involved and anybody have an opinion and anybody have an idea.
That's right. And I think one of the things I've learned from Andy when it comes to creativity is you shouldn't prejudge ideas. In a brainstorm scenario or in a discussion scenario, it's called red light thinking. We need green light thinking in an ideas session where every idea is viable. It's only once you've then written the ideas up that you then need to apply red light thinking, which is when you qualify them and actually work out which might be which might be practical and which you might be able to deliver. And the other thing I think Andy said, which I do agree with, is our default position is often let's have a brainstorm, but actually it shouldn't always have to come to a brainstorm. Often an account team, for example, or a senior team or a mixed team can actually discuss a brief and come up with the ideas themselves, and it doesn't actually need to go to brainstorm stage, and that will save you a huge amount of time and effort.
Red light, green light. You know Andy better than I do. I've met him quite a few times. How did you first meet him, and what's he like outside of work?
Well, a very inspirational boss, I must admit. One of these guys that...
Like me? Carry on.
One of these guys who very much has a higher purpose. At the time I met him, it was very much about championing creativity. Yeah. To be quite honest, I was straight out of university, very scruffy looking. I think Andy, as part of my signing on deal, bought me a suit that I could wear, which obviously being a 21-year-old in public relations, I then wore everywhere all the time, regardless of the occasion.
Nice.
I can't remember the last time I wore a suit, actually, including a tie, of course, as well, and some really horrible...
There's a whole podcast then. When did suits die?
Yeah, I know.
In marketing? When did we all stop wearing suits? Because I remember when I started out years ago, that was like in the year 2001, and we went to 2001, and we went to SmithKline and Beecham, or now it's now GlaxoSmithKline, the big building just off the A40, and we were all in suits and ties and everything from the agency, and we worked with them for a number of years. And all their marketing guys were all casual, and that was a new thing. It was like a thing that was coming over from America. Anyway, there's a whole pod in that.
I once got rejected from a job interview. I went to, I'm not going to name the agency. I went to a job interview in London during the start of my career, and I wore a suit and a tie, and I got refused on the basis that I was too corporate, apparently, which is quite amusing.
They don't know you, do they?
No. But anyway, yeah, it was really great actually working for Andy. I think I worked for him for about 18 months. Back to the suit, the suit conversation.
Did he measure you for it?
He's not a tailor.
Did he take your inside leg measurement?
No, he didn't. I went to Burton's menswear. I think it cost about 100 quid. And I got shoes included with it. It was shirt, shoes, tie, suit for 100. They're awful. You know, those Cornish pasty shoes.
Yeah.
You know the ones I mean. Anyway, when I had to dress up as the Yorkshire Air Ambulance mascot, Bertie the Bear,
right,
I was wearing the suit.
This is when said incident happened.
Yeah, exactly.
When which I
mentioned in episode 1.
Yeah.
So I was...
Tune in if you want to hear more about that.
Inside the suit, I think it was about 30 degrees as well, and I was sweating inside this suit for about 4 hours wearing a Sorry, yeah, wearing anyway. But yeah, great working for Andy. I bucked my ideas up after a few months. I think, when you do go, and sometimes if you are used to the student lifestyle and you suddenly move into a corporate world, I'd probably didn't carry myself in the best possible light. And I remember Andy had a word with me one day. And let's just say I bucked my ideas up, and the rest is history.
You're very professional now, I'll give you that. Okay, well, interesting. So, yeah, fascinating podcast. I mean, he covered a lot of ground, and there's so much more he can go through. As we said, we'll put all the details in the show notes. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you for episode 4 in a couple of weeks.
And a final point, if you want to find out more, make sure you check out the website, which is dublinconversations.org. That's got all the information, the models, and the stages that Andy talked about. And make sure you head over there, and that's going to get you on your way to finding out more about your personal purpose.
And if you enjoyed listening this week, please leave us a comment or review telling us what you thought, what we're missing, what would you like to hear. We want your feedback, and if you've got a story to tell us your fuck up, write to sociallyua@prohibitionpr.co.uk. That's sociallyua@prohibitionpr.co.uk, and we're going to read out the best ones. We had some cracking ones in the last episode, and we're going to bring some more for episode 4. So see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Socially Unacceptable. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram @ProhibitionPR. We would love to hear some of your career fuck-ups so we can share them on the show. For more information on the show, search Prohibition PR in your search engine and click on podcasts. Until next time, please keep pushing the boundaries and embracing the socially unacceptable.